Mary Catherine Ham, Brian Wilson, Brian Neiman, today's newsmakers, and you, the Morning Majority. 101.9 FM, AM 630. WMAL.
8:07 on a Monday morning in Washington, D.C. Pat Buchanan joins us now. You know, Pat Buchanan, been in the news for forever, it seems, and always has an interesting take on life. He's got a new book out called Suicide of a Superpower. Will America Survive to 2025? Good morning, Pat. How are you?
Morning. I have been around a long time, long enough to have been over at WRC competing with you.
All right, fantastic. Well,
right.
It's great to talk to you, and I mean that in a positive way because you've been writing and saying things for quite some time, and a lot of things have come true. But your question on the your title of the book, "Will America Survive to 2025?" Why specifically did you pick 2025 out?
Well, I used Andrei Almalrik, who was a young fellow that wrote "Will the Soviet Union Survive Until 1984?" and he picked 14 years from 1970, and everybody sort of laughed it off as his creed, and they ran him out of his country. And in 1991, his country came apart into 15 nations. What I'm talking about is not so much whether we're going to survive as a legal and political entity, but whether we're going to survive as one nation, indivisible under God, and one people, because I see the society really disintegrating along the lines of faith, culture, ethnicity, everything else.
And one of the reasons you feel that way is because you've taken a look at the demographics going forward. Talk about that a little.
Well, right. Well, every country, I think, if you could define it, they're generally defined by borders, by language, by traditions and history, and also by an ethno-national core. For example, the Frenchmen in France, they went through the Revolution, the monarchy, the Restoration, the Empire, and the Republic, and still they were French. We're going to have now, by 2041, there's going to be there's going to be every American, whites, African American, Asians Americans, and Hispanic Americans are all going to be minorities. And fellas, I'm wondering what's going to hold us together now that our common faith and moral code and moral consensus collapsed in the 60s, now that you've got ideological and political conflict, which makes our politics poisonous and also ineffective. And you've got the half the folks in Los Angeles don't speak English in their own home. All of these things are happening at once, and I fear that this country is going to balkanize and turn into a Tower of Babel and not really a country at all.
So what do we need to hold us together? There would be some that would argue that in generations past, many people didn't speak English in their homes for a generation or two, but that sort of smoothed itself out.
Well, I think that one reason that you got a problem with the Hispanic immigration is it's going to be 135 million in here at mid-century, and heavily located in the American Southwest on the border with Mexico, so that socially and culturally they'll be as much a part of Mexico as the United States. And there's no need in these communities to learn English because the communities are so large, they're self-sustaining. And I think when you have that, you become, if you will, binational and bilingual. And all over the world, Mary Catherine, these countries are breaking apart along the lines of language, religion, and faith. You see it in Ethiopia, you see it in Sudan, you see it all over the world.
Is that different than, like, say, Little Italy was in the beginning of the century?
Yes, it is in this sense, because Little Italy, these were little communities up there. And over time, there's no doubt all of those folks, for example, were Christian. Almost all of them desperately wanted to be Americans. They sent their kids to school where American history was taught and English literature and language. Parochial schools I went to did that. And we came out. I wasn't speaking Gaelic. I was speaking English, And so I think what we had, the melting pot, that's the key thing, the melting pot, it's been rejected in favor of multiculturalism. But Angela Merkel in Germany and Cameron in Britain and Sarkozy in France have all declared that multiculturalism in their country, where it's basically folks from the Islamic world have come in, that has utterly failed. These countries are becoming two societies in one country.
Patrick, one of the definitions of a superpower is that you must be able to project military might around the world. I mean, you really can't be a superpower unless you can do that. We're withdrawing from Iraq, and as you look at the rest of the world and the places where we've invested our military might, are we making the right decisions?
Well, I think, Brian, the decisions are now being forced upon us. You are correct. America is a military superpower and remains so today. but we are drawing down troops in Korea and Japan, and frankly, we ought to be drawing them down in Germany. They shouldn't be there 20 years after the Cold War. We're coming out of Afghanistan. We're almost out of Iraq. I think the very fact that we're running a deficit of 10% of GDP with the public debt rising to 100%, I think is going to mandate cuts, and the cuts are going to come in defense, and they're going to come in overseas bases, and the countries we've been defending are going to have to defend themselves.
But some people say that's a good thing. Other people look at it and say it's a bad thing to draw down your military might that much.
Well, let me ask you something. Why, when Japan is probably the second richest or one of the richest countries in the world, why are we borrowing money from Japan to defend Japan? Why are we borrowing money from Europe to defend Europe? It's 20 years after the Cold War.
Well, I know why we are in Japan, Patrick.
Of themselves?
I know why we are in Japan. I mean, the financing of it is an interesting question, but we're in Japan because we're worried about what might happen in the Taiwanese Straits. We're in Germany because we need to have a presence in Europe. We're in other places.
Have a presence in Germany?
We need to have a presence in Europe because our forces might be. We can't project forces from the United States that quickly. Should we need to project forces into Europe?
Well, why are we? Who threatens Europe today? I mean, our forces are over there on the Elbe River, and the Red Army is about 1,000 miles to the east behind the Ural Mountains. 20 years ago, the Cold War was over. Let me tell you something. Eisenhower in 1961, when Kennedy came in, he said, pull the forces out of Europe now. They are big enough and strong enough. They've recovered to defend themselves, and if we don't, they will become welfare dependents. And that is exactly what almost all of those European countries have become.
All right, before we let you go, I have to ask you, you have a chapter in the book called The End of White America, which is getting a lot of attention. What are you worried about? Where is the end of white America? What do you mean by that?
I mean that by 2041, white Americans will be in a minority. And we have no ethno-national core. That's one of the things that holds nations together, like France and England, etc. And when we do, I'm asking, what is it that will hold us together when we got no common religion, no common moral code, 2 languages at least, and maybe more in the United States of America? We don't agree on our history. We don't agree on whether we can even celebrate or talk about Christmas or Easter in school. What are we going to agree on? This is the point. It is the disintegration of the nation, not any invasion not any attack from Russia or Iran or someone that threatens our country.
Well, there's not common ground from Hispanics who are primarily Catholic. I mean, you would have that religion. You have a Christianity basis that's somewhat galvanizing.
Point. If you take a look at the other chapter, The End of Christian America, taken from that Newsweek cover, the number of Christians in the country is down from 85% to 75%. It's much lower even among the young in the United States of America. And secondly, the chapter on Catholicism shows that all these churches are splitting and sundering over issues like abortion and gay marriage and gay rights and all of these things. They're splitting apart. The Episcopalian Church, which basically was the Republican Party at prayer, they used to say, that's disintegrating. So all of this is what I'm pointing out all through this book, is all those things that held the country together when I was growing up, say, in 1960 in the Eisenhower-Kennedy era, all of them are breaking up and breaking down, and at the same time we're bringing in folks in the millions every year who have never been assimilated, and we've rejected our old melting pot that worked.
All right, Pat Buchanan, good to have you on the program. Thanks very much.